Alright, so today I thought I would try and tell the story of how I almost died in Scotland. And I thought I might sort of take the long way getting there, so hopefully it's not too boring. But it all starts right around the summer before my final year of college, my undergrad. I sort of realized that it was my last chance to have some big adventure for a long time because when you're a college student, you can get student loans to go visit Europe for a month. And when you're an adult, you have to be financially stable and all of that. So yeah, I decided that I was gonna study abroad for a little bit, and I enrolled in this summer school program at Exeter, this very nice, very posh little university in the south of England. And it was funny being there because I definitely felt like the oldest student. I know I wasn't the oldest, but a lot of the students gave off like rich kid on their first big vacation away from mom and dad kind of vibes. And I was there just kind of existing and drifting and a part of it. And there's one story I think that in particular really exemplifies this dynamic. So I looked up the city before going there, and there were these cool walking paths. So most nights after school I would go and wander around the city and like take pictures of the churches and the trees and stuff. There were a lot of really pretty areas, and it's actually really sad because my hard drive died and I lost almost all of my pictures. I had thousands of pictures from that trip and I lost most of them, but just a really gorgeous area. And one night I was walking back from a walk, I was almost back, and I had found this, the path continued. It was like between the woods, this wild woods with a hill going down on one side, and then this kind of stone wall on the other side with the houses and the neighborhoods behind it. And I was like, oh, this is a nice little path. I mean, it's a little dark, but there's no one around, it's just peaceful, which turned out to not be a great thing, because, every few blocks or so there was like a stairwell leading up out of the path. And right after I passed the stairwell, like maybe 40 feet past it, this guy comes down out of the stairwell and starts speed walking towards me. And this is something that people in the UK apparently do, is speed walk places. Like in America, I feel like that's only old ladies in malls, I don't know, but people are in a hurry there apparently. So that wasn't totally out of the ordinary, but I was also like a little freaked out, like I was the only other person on the path and they're speed walking behind me. So I started speed walking, but this guy is still gaining on me. I've got like a block to go for the next stairwell. Finally I get to the stairwell, I go up it as fast as I can. He's speed walking up the stairwell, which, like, why'd you get on this path for one segment and then get back off again? Like, are you actually following me? I'm in the residential area now. I take several, like, right, left, right, and he's still behind me, which, like, that's a little sus, right? Wherever you're going, you do not need to make that many turns. But finally, I make a turn and I see cars moving on the street in front of me. I'm like, oh, thank God, there's people here. And I glance behind me, and he did not follow me on this turn. Curious. So anyway, nothing happened to me, thankfully. I don't know if anything would have, or if he was just really in a hurry to get to like his friend's place. Could secretly be the second time that I almost died in England, and I wouldn't know. But now I'm in the middle of the city, and I don't really know where I am, kind of turned around, but I head towards where the people are, just as a nice starting point. And I'm in, the area where people are driving and lights are on and there's bars, and I'm about to try and figure out where I am and how to get back a more brightly lit way. And I run into some students from the college, some really bubbly young girls from Brazil, and some guys that are they're going to the clubs and they're like, come along with us, and like I left for my walk straight from school, so I still have my backpack on with like one notebook in it, and I'm wearing a shirt probably like this one of the shirts I brought on the trip, some random t-shirt, and what may possibly be the ugliest pair of jean shorts in existence. I was packing for comfort because I knew I'd be backpacking after this. So I had these like knee-length, stretchy, like horrible jean shorts on, tennis shoes, and then also for a large portion of the trip I had this just giant pimple right here. It took weeks to clear up. It was a whole thing. So I'm like, okay, I'll come to the clubs with you. We go to the first place and it's like party central, like people smushed in together. Someone tries to unzip my backpack and I turn around and they have this shocked look on their face. Like, I'm assuming it's because they got caught trying to steal from me, but part of me wants to believe that it was just the pimple on my face and just the experience of seeing me. I don't know, but the funniest part was we go to the second place and I walk right up to the door like, hey, let's, get going. I turn around. It's a whole patio bar situation. I walked right past the bouncer. Every other person in my group is getting carded except for me. Which is just, I don't know, funny. It's, great for my self-esteem. But anyway, that was Exeter, and then I wasn't gonna let my expensive plane ticket to Europe go to waste, so I had carefully, meticulously planned out little things to do each day. I had my backpack, I had my bus pass, and I would go to a town and I would have like, here are the things to do in this town, here's where you're staying, and here are the bus times. So as long as I got to the bus the next day, I could wander around, I could people watch. It was very chill, it was very nice. And honestly, my favorite thing about my trip, which I recommend to anyone, is going into local convenience stores and trying the food. Like, in America, you can go to a Walmart anywhere and you will see the exact same food, the exact same Hostess snack cakes, the exact same sodas, everything, same flavors, same brands. Like, maybe there are some regional things like maple candy or something. I think that's a thing somewhere, but in the UK, I mean, some of the brands are just renamed American brands, but there's different flavors. They had onion flavored chips, and there was a whole thing where they had sandwiches, like you can sometimes get like an egg salad sandwich in a gas station in America, but it was like a big thing. Everyone ate these convenience store sandwiches, and they had this flavor, mayonnaise and prawn. It's exactly what you think it would be. It's like whole grain bread with gross mayonnaise and just plain old boiled shrimp on it. Prawn, it's like smaller shrimp. So bad, so gross. I don't know why. People liked it apparently because they sold it everywhere. That and flapjacks. I'm not even gonna explain myself about the flapjacks. I had an incident where I thought, they're not so bad. I bought a giant tub of flapjacks, and not pancakes. I almost threw up eating those things. I had to throw it out. Like, and I'm not a person who's about wasting food, but I had to throw them out. May your experience with flapjacks be different than mine, but I can't stand them. But I brought this up to say, not as a cautionary tale, but in Northern Ireland there was a flavor of sandwich, roast turkey and stuffing sandwich. It was so good, like the best sandwich I've ever had in my life. So good. Maybe I was just hungry, I don't know, but wherever you're traveling, as long as it's not in America, try the local food. And especially if you're traveling alone, like for me, I did not have the money to go to restaurants a lot, and I was too shy. I spent a whole like hour in London walking between restaurants thinking maybe this one, and I didn't end up walking into any of them because I was too nervous to walk into one alone. But convenience stores, there's not that same pressure. So anyway, that's my advice for traveling. But to get back to the story, since I'm losing my way here, one day I had a hike planned for myself. I figured I should, you know, spend some time outside. There's these beautiful, you know, wild areas in England and Scotland and Ireland and whatnot. And so there's this website, and on the website they have all of these different listings for different places to hike, and it said Ring of Steel for this hike, which meant like these steel mountains, but I didn't realize that, and I am from a very, very, very flat place of America. Mountains do not pop into my mind easily. So I saw these pictures of the hike and I thought, wow, these are some nice hills. Get a view of the valley. How lovely. Nowhere in my mind did I even begin to think that it was mountains. And I mean, technically I think it's like 20 feet short of an official mountain, but I am calling it a mountain. It was scary. I almost died. Alright, so nitpick if you will, but I remember specifically I was at the hostel the morning before going on this hike, and this girl asks me where I'm going, and I tell her, and she's like, oh, And later she told me, I should have warned you. You didn't seem like you were, like you knew what you were doing. I was like, yeah, you probably should have warned me. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But she didn't warn me, and I left for the hike, and there were some warning signs that I probably should not have missed. For example, at the beginning of the trail, there's a sign that says, warning, people have died on this trail. And, you know, I probably should have thought about that a little bit more, but I was like, oh, you know, I could see that. This path right ahead of me has some steep areas. Maybe, you know, someone who's a little bit older lost their balance or something. Because there was this sort of foothill covered in trees before the actual mountain, so I couldn't see where I was going. I just saw the forest, and I walked in, and I thought, yeah, this is a little steep here. And then I ran into this group of Boy Scouts, probably like 8 kids and a couple adults, and they all had these like serious heavy-duty hiking backpacks on, the kind that strap around the waist, and like they probably had like 3 days worth of supplies or something in there. And I was like, oh, where are you guys going? And they said the Ring of Steel hike. I was like, they're really over prepared for this. I guess it's because it's a lot of kids, you know, and they need to be careful or something. Maybe they're just gonna take it slow and do some kind of overnight thing. So anyway, I get around the bend and I see the mountain, and the thing about mountains, in my experience, my very limited experience, is that they look smaller from the bottom and from the top. So I was still sort of thinking like, oh, well, this isn't what I expected, but I guess I'll keep going. And there's this stream, there's like a waterfall coming off the mountain, and then this little stream, maybe like 10 feet across, that I've gotta cross before I get going up the mountain. And first thing that happens is that there's moss all over these rocks, and what I've been afraid of this whole time with the landscape of the area happens. I step on what I think is solid ground, and my foot goes all the way down this hole in the rocks, almost twisting my ankle. Thankfully I did not, but I was like, that's not a good sign. then I get to the stream and there's this couple further up, you know, taking a break, filling, I think, a water bottle or something, and I look over at them and past them to the waterfall, and right at the base of this waterfall is a dead lamb that clearly fell off the mountain and is now like skin and bones decaying under the waterfall. And I'm like, well, that's not a good sign. And then, as I've done many times before, I, you know, go to step stone across the river. There's not like a bridge, you just jump on the rocks, but even though it's a very small river, I still managed to slip on the final rock and fall in water all the way up to my crotch. So now I'm half soaking wet on this cold day. But I climb back out, trying to salvage my dignity, even though the couple is looking right at me like, what kind of moron is going on this trail today with us? And I keep going even though I'm half soaking wet, and like, I think that my jacket is waterproof still. It's not waterproof, so it's not long before the entirety of my being is soaked in water because, well, as I start climbing the mountain, these clouds are really low, and by the time I get to the top, the mist from the clouds, like, it's tiny droplets of water, but it's whipping by so fast that it stings. So by the time I get towards the top, I'm completely soaked in water. I don't really feel cold, but I clearly was. But anyway, before I get to the top, I just want to say, like, in the middle of the mountain is when you really feel how long the hike is. Like, I look over at the mountain across from me, and there's a whole valley halfway up that mountain, like a whole valley, a huge amount of land that you can't even see from the ground, and I'm only halfway up. There's a certain point climbing up this mountain where it went from, I guess I can keep going, this isn't so bad, to it's too steep for me to climb back down. Because there's a certain point where I looked down and I realized that the land I was climbing up was like steeper than a stairwell, and that if I tried to climb back down in any way, I was going to slip and fall the entire way down the mountain, probably breaking my neck in the process. And to my left, there's this deep ravine that's even steeper, and if I were to roll into that, then I'm definitely going all the way down to the bottom, and it's all full of gravel, so there's absolutely nothing to grab onto. Instant death, so to speak. And so I keep going. It was probably actually the safe thing to do because I Googled it later, and apparently most people who die on that trail die going the other way, trying to go down on that very stretch of path. So maybe I did the smart thing, that's all I'm saying. But it did mean that I had to keep going up this narrow, like maybe at most 10-foot wide switchback, sort of climbing hands and knees, going up a step and then turning, and up a step and then turning, and up a step. And I want to be clear about this. I am a wuss about heights, and most things really in life. I like to think that I'm this very strong and like capable person, and I am in many ways, but I was just muttering to myself the entire time, like, oh my god, why am I here? Why am I doing this? This is horrible. I hate this. Just the most pathetic thing you could imagine. That was me all the way up this mountain, like probably an hour's hike all the way up. But I get to the top, and my jacket is soaked, and the clouds are angrily smacking me in the face. And it's actually so thick, the clouds, that I'm on this little island, this like 20-foot diameter sphere of mountain top with just an abyss on either side that I could die in. But I keep going and I find this rocky mountain peak. It's like if God just kind of stuck a bunch of boulders together, and there's, you know, an abyss on either side. And I clamber my way over this. It's like surprisingly hard to get over. I was not expecting this amount of academic exertion on this hike, believe me. But I get over the mountain peak, and it's really windy, like I said, and there's this narrow path along the ridge line with like 10 feet on either side before the drop off. So I crawl along this tiny path because I'm so afraid of being blown over the side. Later, after this stretch, I encountered other hikers. I hope to God they didn't see me in the distance crawling along that ridge line, because that would be pathetic. I don't know. But I get to the second rocky, bouldery mountain peak, and I clamber over that. And the clouds have risen now. It's now just raining on me, but the wind is not so intense. So I kind of crouch walk along this ridge line, except when I encounter two other hikers, and then I stand up and I'm like, hi, pretend that nothing is wrong. And I get to the third mountain peak, and I stop because I can't find a way over. I'm looking on the right, I'm looking over the top, I'm looking to the left. There is no clear way over this jumble of boulders. And then I think I see it to the left. I see what looks like two little stair steps down the side. And I don't know why I think anyone would have bothered to to carve steps out of this mountain peak, when clearly crazy people come on this hike and try not to die scrambling over boulders. Like, apparently that's the appeal. I don't know. But I stepped down two little stone stair steps, and I realized this was the wrong way to go. And I know that there is no way to twist and turn around, because these stone stair steps are about as wide as my body, or maybe a little bit narrower. If I were gonna try and twist and go back up, I would, you know, be putting my center of gravity out over the abyss and slipping off, whatever. Like, there's no good way to do that. Plus my feet would be twisting around and they would lose their grip on the rocks and whatnot. It's not even a possibility that I'm considering at this point. But what I'm seeing in front of me is, as I'm sitting here on the side of the mountain, and again, I can only see like 20 feet down before it just drops off. But for some reason, I can see out into the distance. I do have a nice vista in which to consider my impending death. But what I see in front of me is like a foot gap, you know, not very wide, between me and the next stone that I have to step onto. But the rock wall next to me is like jutting out, so that if I want to step from where I am sitting to the next step in front of me, I have to somehow grip onto this rock, swing my body, my whole center of gravity out over the abyss, and somehow get around it and back onto the other side. And remember, it's raining, the rock is wet, and my body is soaking wet at this point. Something I haven't mentioned yet, my hands have swollen up at this point, and they're numb. And I guess it's like frost nip or something, I don't know, not full-on frostbite, but whenever I moved my hands or tried to grip anything, I got these little shocks of like electricity through my fingertips, like if your hands have fallen asleep or something. And this was constant, you know, throughout that day. And yeah, so I just I thought about it, and with all of my experience of trying to do things in life, I thought there's a good chance that I'm not going to be able to pull this off, and that I will slip and fall to my death. So I stopped for a minute just to think about, what would I regret if I die trying to do this right now? And I looked out over the vista. You know, you can see pretty far from a mountaintop. And instantly I knew, like, I would not miss my to-do list. I would not miss any of the things that I wanted to accomplish in life. I wouldn't miss my possessions. Like, you know, it'd be nice to have a will, I guess, but whatever. But the thing that I guess I realized I would feel really sad about sort of not passing on were the things that I knew growing up that had meaning, like the things in life that my parents taught me or that I discovered that made me feel like life was beautiful and worth living. Things that, you know, I thought maybe someday these will be the things that I teach my children about life to help them, you know, have as happy a life as me. And I feel like not only did I not pass them on to anyone else or to any kids, I didn't really even pass them on to myself. Like, I sort of drifted away from that and just let stress take over, let obligations and to-do lists and responsibilities take over, and that's a whole other can of worms, and something that sometimes there are themes in our lives that keep coming back, and we don't always necessarily fully acknowledge them at the time, but that is definitely something that has been popping up throughout my life. But at the time, mostly I said, I guess I would regret not having kids, because these almost intangible, beautiful things in my life are just going to disappear with me if I die right here, right now. So I stopped and I thought about that. You know, you don't want to have to try and think about your regrets in free fall and not know when you're gonna run out of time. But I made it around the rock. It was not slippery and slimy as I expected from being wet. It actually felt dusty even underneath the water, so I was able to get a good grip and get around it. And that's the exciting part, but the story doesn't technically stop there. I walked along another ridge line, and I saw a path go down to the right, which was apparently the path I was supposed to take. But it was, again, super steep, like 20 feet down to another ridge line. I thought, there's no way I'm getting back up that steep path if this was, you know, the wrong way to go. It doesn't look right. So I kept going. I was officially off track by this point, and I saw a town in the distance. It was not the town I started out in. It was a completely separate town, like miles apart. But I saw this town, and that's what I was aiming for. I was gonna get to this town and off the mountain. So I keep walking along this ridge line, and ahead of me I see an even taller mountain with a line along the side. It's far enough in the distance I can't tell for sure, but I'm pretty sure that line is a path along the side of that mountain. And if that path is as narrow as the path that I'm on right now, there is no way I'm hiking along the side of a mountain on a path that narrow and not slipping and dying. So I'm starting to look for some kind of exit strategy. I'm like, I was not that prepared for this. I did not have a mental map of where I was supposed to go, so I still believe that, like, this must be where the ring of steel goes. It goes all the way around this mountain. Like, it was actually a small enough path that I definitely could have done it in one day if I had the right equipment, but I didn't know where I was going. So I'm walking along looking for an exit, and the ground next to me in this section of mountain is actually not super steep. And I think, this has got to be mountain climbing 101. Don't try and forge your own path down the side of a mountain like that you don't know, because you're gonna end up at some cliff you're not expecting, and you're gonna be stuck, or you're gonna fall and like slip off a cliff you're not prepared for. But I see this path going off to the side, and I follow it. I think, thank God, I'm saved, I'm getting off this mountain. And 20 feet into the path, it ends in a giant pile of sheep crap. There are a lot of sheep in Scotland, sort of roaming free, and I'm like, well, this is a sheep trail. Like, am I gonna turn around and go back? No. So I start forging my way down the mountain, which, like, I'm sure is breaking some kind of mountain climbing rule. And I can hear the water trickling all around me. And I'm worried about limestone, because when you have water and limestone, you get little caves and crevices and waterfalls. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna fall in some hole in the ground and like drown or something, but there are no holes in the ground, just mud. Again, mountains look so much shorter from the top and from the bottom. It's like an hour to get down this mountain, and it doesn't look like it should be an hour from the top, but it takes forever. And part of this is that I'm still scared of the steepness. It's not as steep as the drop-offs, but it's still fairly steep, and I'm sort of sliding down on my hands and feet, and just sort of sliding my butt down each step of the way. It's as pathetic as any other portion of my mountain climb that day, to be honest. It was all very pathetic, and like, I was afraid of slipping, but my hands were numb, so I was gripping onto the grass as I slid down and getting all of these lightning shocks up my hand. And I didn't want the lightning shocks, but I didn't want to slip and die. Eventually, the ground got a little bit less steep, and there was this river running down what I think was actually a path. So I was jumping on either side of this river path, trying not to completely soak my already soaking shoes in water. And then the path turned into a muddy trail, and then the muddy trail turned into a gravel trail, and it passed this little shelter. They have shelters for stranded hikers all over Scotland, and then it became a cement trail, and it went past this holiday resort at the base of the mountain. It was like this hotel place. It was huge, and it had this giant parking lot, and this is the middle of the holiday season. Like, it's midsummer. This is when everyone goes to vacation, and it's totally empty. I'm like, what is this abandoned ghost hotel that I'm walking by? Like, did I slip into another dimension while I was on that mountain and the world is empty now? Did people get raptured while I was on the mountain? Like, but I walk past the ghost hotel and down in the driveway, and I'm back in the woods again, and this driveway is like a mile long, and so I'm like, I did end up in another dimension. This is the driveway and trees dimension. There is nothing but this never-ending driveway and trees. But I'm also exhausted, and so I just zone out and walk and hope that I'm going somewhere. Eventually I do get to the main road. I stop at this very shiny, very, a lot of vintage ceramics and clearly too rich for me hotel. And I ask them directions, just generally, because I have no idea where I am, and they send me down the road to the next hotel. It's more of a B&B, and there's a bar underneath, and it's right next to the bus stop. So I get to this little bar place, and it's clearly the place to be on a whatever day of the week night that is. All the locals are there drinking, and I'm standing there dripping all over their floor, asking them about the bus to get back to where I started. They tell me I missed the last bus and it's gonna be like 2.5, 3 hours before the next bus. So I'm feeling weird standing there dripping all over everything. So I go back outside to the, there's like a roof thing. That's where all the smokers are sitting and smoking. And I'm sitting there with the smokers, chatting with this like sort of older, middle-aged guy, either chain smoking or just smoking really slowly, I don't know, but we're talking and I'm like starting to violently shake because it is cold outside and I'm still completely soaking wet, and I ask him like, do you think it'd be okay if I went inside anyway, even though I'm going to be dripping all over their floor? And he just looks at me like he hasn't actually seen me up until this point, and he's like, hold on a moment, walks inside, don't know where he's gone, brings his wife outside with him, she also has no idea what's going on. Finally it comes out, they're on vacation, they have their RV with them. They take me inside their RV and give me completely dry clothes. I'm talking shirt, pants, underwear, socks. I have a large foot size and I don't know how they managed it, but they got dry shoes for me, dry tennis shoes for me, and a waterproof jacket, an honest to God waterproof jacket. I'm blown away by this. And they don't stop there. They buy me dinner and a drink. I'm sitting there talking to quite possibly the nicest couple in Scotland for like an hour and a half, telling them my story and everything. And then this part just always gets me. I walk into the bathroom after, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours in this bar. We're about to go wait at the bus stop. Use the bathroom, brace myself, look in the mirror. My hair is a crazy mess, like a cheap wig found in a dumpster behind a bar kind of situation. It's bad, but I look at my face and my lips are still purple. I've eaten a whole meal. I've been inside for hours, had a drink, talked to people. Apparently I was colder than I thought I was, and the couple kept saying, oh, if we didn't help you out, we'd be reading about you in the paper, but I didn't feel cold, but apparently I was cold. And my hands, which were swollen, I was actually talking to people on the bus ride home, showing them my disgusting swollen hands, which I'm sure they appreciated, but it took a week for the swelling to go down and for the nerve damage to resolve itself, so that was pretty bad too. Those poor, I spent the bus ride talking to these 3 German businessmen on holiday, and I have a feeling it was probably my peak obnoxious American moment, because I hadn't talked to anyone in weeks on this trip. I'd been backpacking by myself, and I was exhausted showing them my gross swollen hands and telling them about my journey in the mountains. They didn't seem completely interested, but for some reason I just kept talking. Anyway, that's my story of how I almost died and got a moment to think about my life, and